If ever there was a more Arsenal thing that Arsenal couldn't Arsenal, then in previous years it was, of course, the Everton game. And every player's referenced this now because there are literally years of times where Arsenal have had a hard time going to a ground like Goodison, and not many people get away from Goodison with a particularly easy win. Some people see them as a bit of a bogey side, other people see them as a team that's always been hard to play, especially since the David Moyes era, but even before that you could argue that there wasn't really a team that liked facing Everton. But particularly Arsenal, after last season, after what Sean Dyche did, after the way he cancelled out the opposition, after the way that it was his first game as the Everton manager, he was the guy who was basically meant to turn things around for Everton, and Arteta was meant to be the guy that took Arsenal to the title. This was kind of at the beginning of that little stumbling period for them, and so it sticks hard in the mind. And of course, teams don't really think, 20 years ago we lost to this team. They think, hey, last season we lost to this configuration or this style, or this was what was difficult for us last year. And in a game like this, it's less about team versus team and more matchup versus matchup. But the more that you look at the way that Mikel Arteta constructing his squad and everyone who is in it is going, the more that you begin to think, this guy is thinking about matchups. This guy is thinking about specific areas in the pitch where Arsenal were, should we say, particularly not weak, but just not as technical as the opposition. And that's why when you had the conversation around moving a Granit Xhaka out and bringing in a Declan Rice, or having Odegaard and on the opposite side Vieira or Havertz, whichever one of these orientations you wanted to have, you knew that there was a reason they were playing with that player in that position. Now, Arsenal might actually have a strongest starting 11, at least technically, at least financially, at least value-wise to the team, or at least in FIFA terms, right? But even in those FIFA terms, you can still sort of tell yourself, there are better orientations of this side than just the one that Mikel Arteta is fielding. And of course, on the podcast earlier in the week with Alex from The Different Knock, there was this whole conversation around the idea of Mikel Arteta being a genius, but within that, his plan A, 1, 2, 3, 4, and as far as you want to go. And this was a perfect example of that. In previous years, Arsenal get sucked into a slobber knocker of a game. They go blow for blow with an Everton. They decide that, hey, we can play them at the game that they want to play. Arsenal did not get sucked into that, and you can kind of see that. All of the different, is that really happening? Yeah, sure, why not? I'm in an airport. I'm in Slovenia. Of course. All of the previous years where they would have got sucked into that, they thought they wanted to suck all the energy out of this game. And the immediate idea here was very simple. In the first 15 minutes, kill the atmosphere, kill everything that Everton are going to come with, make sure that we control the possession, we control the game, we control the opportunities. And early on, you could kind of see it was a bit of a almost possessional flex from Arsenal, who finished the game, by the way, with 75% of the possession, way more of the shots on target, which actually were on target, and way more in terms of just everything you want to see in a game. Chances created, fouls conceded, all these kind of things. They're all cumulative, and that's what Arsenal are now. Previous years, they lose this game. It's just true. Previous year, they lost this game. But you get my point here. In previous years, this Arsenal side doesn't exhibit the same kind of qualities they did in this game, the same match control and the same confidence in A2, A3, A4 than you would in previous years. And now here's the thing, right? When you speak about Mikel Arteta's A1, A2, A3, it's still a grading system. But actually what he's talking about here is we could start with A3 and shift to A1 at the end of the game. Now, stay with me on this one, right? If you start the game with someone like Nketiah, Saka, and Martinelli, the orientation is going to be very different from Trossard, Gabriel Jesus, and Kai Havertz coming on later. This is this idea that we've been talking about for a while now of the units, everything that happens with that, right? And if you're, say, unitizing your team and you've got a defensive unit, an attacking unit, all these kind of things, then immediately after you bring on a Kai Havertz, or immediately after you bring on whoever it is in that starting lineup, right? You get yourself into a position where you basically go, right, we've completely changed everything for the opposition, and now they have to compete with our new shape, our new orientation, we're going to go through the middle now rather than around the outside, exactly like Gabriel Jesus did, exactly like when they brought on Trossard, his average position was going to be, exactly like when you put Kai Havertz in the middle, when you try and stop up the side that Everton are particularly attacking down, when you put Tomiyasu particularly deep on that side so he can give the support to the centre-back that's already being dragged over that way because Zinchenko is trying to get into that midfield area. All these kind of different options that Mikel Arteta is reading the game, making in-game changes with. You think to yourself, right, of course he knows 10 times more than we do, and all we're trying to do is make the strongest side and go, right, that strongest team just keeps playing. That's not the way it works, especially not throughout a season, and especially not after an international break. You saw this with Jurgen Klopp, you saw this with Pep Guardiola post-international break, you saw this even with Manchester United. These players come back and they've played different minutes, they might be in different zones in terms of fitness, in terms of endurance within the game. And if you want to try and deploy them in, say, the way that you would always put them out against Everton, you're going to lose the game because Everton have had a lot longer to prepare. Everton have had a lot longer to work out where it is that Arsenal are going. And someone like Sean Dyche particularly enjoys negating an Arsenal side. It's just something that he gets pleasure from. So the more that you can obviously starve the pleasure of Sean Dyche. Anyway, the reason I got a little awkward there is there were some security guards and they were just staring. Just pay for YouTube Premium, mate. Do you know what I mean? By the way, I just took my mic off, so I just wanted to add this in real quick. The Raya Ramsdale thing is already kind of tired. And already you can see that it's like, hey, we're not really here to have this specific debate. Ramsdale's a fantastic keeper. Raya is too. In time, I think we're going to see the different techniques that Mikel Arteta deploys them in. But it kind of worked quite well in this game. Like if you've got a goalkeeper that you need to be more distributive. It's weird because at the start of the season, you might say, actually, this is a Ramsdale game. Then when you see how Raya is deployed, you sort of go, and maybe this is part of it. Like if you play a different goalkeeper, if you add an extra dimension to your back line that the opposition weren't expecting, you're changing your shape, not entirely, but you're changing it a lot to the point where they then have to make those adjustments based on something completely different they've been training to all week. So I don't know, I kind of rate it at this point, even though obviously I love Ramsdale. But I kind of like Raya too. You get what I'm saying though? There's like this, what's going on there sort of thing. And it works. I think it worked. I think the real issue with Arsenal is it's not these games, it's the big games. Then which goalkeeper do you decide on? Then where's the confidence at? It's just that cumulatively, come the end of the season, you might be looking at these Everton games, similarly to last season, and going, glad we won that, or should have won that. Today, it's a glad we won that. And last season, it would have been a should have won that. Just saying. If you then aren't 100% sure that you have your best midfield fit, or you aren't 100% sure that you have, you've quite got the control that you want in midfield with a Rice, Odegaard, Vieira type combination, because it does seem maybe a little floaty at times. The best thing you can do is Mikel Arteta is start with a really solid back line, which is almost exactly what they started with, right? You've basically got 3 centre-backs in there, and 2 of them are playing in a very solid centre-back formation, but Ben White is basically being a centre-back further down the field. Whilst a lot of people might say, hey, you're being a fullback in fullback terms, playing a centre-back in fullback changes the role. They're not the only people to do it. Obviously, at the moment, someone like Pep Guardiola is also playing 4 centre-backs as the back line. But what it does for Arsenal is it makes them a little bit more solid. When you bring on Tomiyasu, you're basically adding to that 4 centre-back idea. You're just making them a little bit more dynamic. And sure, they might bomb on, sure, they might play in that fullback type role, but it's not the same fullback as if you have, say, a Tomiyasu on the right side or a Timber on the right side or the other side. The whole Timber thing in the first place and the fact they can't deploy Timber any longer kind of plays into this idea that he wants that 4 centre-back or the 4 defensively minded but technically brilliant players that can then go forward. And then on top of that, let's just face it, like Rice is settling in here. Rice is making a difference to this side. Rice is actually progressing the midfield to a degree where maybe you didn't think it could have happened. Like when you see the satisfaction that Partey gives the rest of the attacking players, when you see what Zinchenko is doing slotting in, that worked in previous years, doesn't really work so much now. So, and that's not because they're not good players, by the way. Like I feel like a lot of this is a real, there's this issue right now. The analysis is either the player had a good game, the player had a bad game, the player played well, the player didn't pass it. That we go into all these individual stats and then go, we don't acknowledge the overall system. And what Arteta was talking about was the overall system, right? the overall system is stronger for having Kai Havertz, Declan Rice, even Vieira, even Odegaard. By the way, Vieira, a player that's hugely maligned in the past because of his starts against Sporting and things like that, where people basically just went, oh, he's just not a good player. Writing players off like that isn't going to help you in the long term, especially as Mikel Arteta probably knows a lot more than you do about his squad selection, squad size, rotations within the team. Why would they sell a Balogun if they didn't have confidence in the rest of the players scoring? Why would they try and move other players on like Xhaka if they didn't think they had a midfield option? There are other teams struggling to upgrade their midfield right now or in a midfield transition, and for some weird reason, we totally get it when it's like, hey, Liverpool moved on Hendo and Fabinho. Why don't we get it when they move on a Xhaka or even a Partey and try to... Here's the thing, like they're not trying to make it, they're not trying to necessarily technically upgrade a position and go, you're a better 6 than Partey, or you're a better 8 than Granit Xhaka. It's more, say you had a pentagon, and you still want to keep a 5-sided shape, but you want to strengthen one of those positions and shift it around a little bit so you can just leave Declan Rice deep, because then you can make Odegaard cook, or you can allow Vieira the space to mess up a little bit further down the field. Maybe you can't do that if you're playing a Partey or a Xhaka on the other side because of what you need other people to fill in for. They're thinking about the balance of the team, and the balance of the side was actually a lot of what won it today for them. There was a lot of time, obviously, I think Everton basically, we need to talk about the opposition, sat deep for a long time and basically went, hey, we're going to get an opportunity at some point. We'll surprise them at some point. We'll hit them on the counter-attack at some point. Beto will do something. Didn't quite come, but sure. And obviously they brought on Dominic Calvert-Lewin later. Obviously there's other options they brought on. I feel like the lack of acknowledgement that Mikel Arteta has at the moment in trying to transition this side, in trying to make them technically even better, in trying to take them a step even further forward than they already were, and kind of keep up with the rest of the teams in the league, whilst also trying to basically compete with City, kind of gets overlooked outside of just the Arsenal world. So sure, like, I get it. You know, City went out there and absolutely dominated this weekend. Liverpool basically switched on in the second half and went, hey, remember we're Liverpool. Chelsea, let's not talk about them for now. But the same for other sides, right? There's teams that seem to be stuttering and there's teams that seem to be remembering how dominant they are, their identity, all those kind of things, right? Arsenal are a side that I think is midway between those two and is basically just going, hey, this midfield can catch up. And that's going to empower that front line. You've still got Martinelli and Saka up front, 2 fantastic players. And then when you add Trossard into that, by the way, brilliant strike today, brilliant left foot finish. Like that's why you buy Trossard, is to be a separator in these kind of games. Almost in a similar ilk to the way that he was at Brighton. He played so much deeper. He was so much more supportive. He was so intricate in those passing balls. It was almost a bit of a, like, Kai Havertz came on and flipped to the other side of where he normally is, where you maybe would have expected him to be. He was given this like much freer role, and Trossard similarly, but they both satisfied the left and the right side of that formation. So I like when Trossard comes on. The team looks really dynamic. Sometimes the intricacy of things can break down because he's thinking so much on what Arteta wants him to do, but I actually really enjoy it, and it's actually arguably a more enjoyable watch, even though Odegaard's obviously fantastic. I thought there were really good comments earlier this week about Odegaard, because people asked Arteta in press conferences, oh, what is it that, you know, is he really a long-term fixture here? Like, you know, what is he really? Like, how is he going to fit into this new iteration of the team? You've got rid of Xhaka, you've got rid of Partey. Is Odegaard another position you could upgrade? And he sort of said, oh, he'll be here for years. He'll be one of those players that stays for generations kind of thing. That kind of energy that he's put into your Kai Havertz, your Odegaards, those kind of things, I think is really valuable for a young side that's building. So yeah, overall, obviously not the strongest of, you know, overall performances. But I think the point is actually in this game is the result and the way they achieve that result. Like, it's kind of like one of those exams. You can get the right answer, but you've got to show you're working. And at the moment, we are seeing Mikel Arteta's working, or at least we're trying to like pick apart what his working is, and I'm not quite sure that we know what he's trying to achieve yet. I think when it gets to its final form, when you've got Rice in harmony with 2 other players in that midfield, or maybe even 3, or maybe even 1, if there's that double pivot style idea, I think we'll probably be like, oh, that's what he's working on. But I feel like at the moment, because of the transition in tactics in the Premier League, and some people being almost a bit last season-y and some people being a bit this season-y, you have to adapt. and almost make in-game tweaks, which you always do, obviously, but in-game tweaks which then allow you the supremacy in terms of numbers in a certain part of the field. Go and look at those average positions. Go and look at the places where Everton were trying to like pepper Arsenal towards the end of the game. Tomiyasu, Trossard, even just lots of players dropping back a little bit more. The emphasis on the Martinelli or something like that was zero towards the end of the game because they brought someone else on and dropped right back. And then Gabriel Jesus average touches right the way down the field because they're trying to get that out. Just what we're trying to do is read these units, how things change, how they then challenge that back line. Anyway, I'd be really interested to know what your guys' thoughts are. Let me know how you kind of read the game. I'm looking for a conversation here. I'm looking for some good comments that I can use in my next video. And I'm actually pretty happy with that win for Arsenal. Chat to you guys in a little while. Much love. Bye.